Good morning. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Happy holidays once again, whatever you're celebrating. I hope you're having a grand time with your loved ones, by yourself, however you envision it. And thank you so much for joining me. This is our AM Actual News. I have a bunch of latest news and headlines and readouts for you today, this morning. So you will be well informed and you'll be starting your day, hopefully, on a high note. Now let's check the comments real quick. Merry Christmas, says Alexander. Merry Christmas. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Merry Christmas. So many Santas. I love it. In all shades and colors. Alrighty, so let's begin with some actual news. First, I wanted to ask you if you checked out the podcast because I'm looking for your feedback, honestly. Do you like it? Do you use it? Do you find it useful in any way? I would love to hear from you. The podcast is called Breaking News, the actual news podcast. It's available all over, on all platforms, podcast platforms of your choosing, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any pretty much any other platform, Pandora, iHeartRadio, whatever you listen to it, it's available there. And yeah, and then if you haven't checked out the Christmas tour from the White House, yours truly did it. Went to the White House, recorded the tour, interviewed people. Would love for you to check this out. It's all available on YouTube. So if you're tuning in on YouTube now, please subscribe, please like this, and you will be able to watch the tour as well. Alrighty? Okay, so let's start. Remember the story of Nippon Steel where they couldn't decide on the deal, and then ultimately it all went to President Biden to decide on that? And they were running out of time, and so they decided ultimately to extend the closing date for their $14.9 billion deal with US Steel. It's all up to President Biden to decide upon, and he's most likely to block the deal, but they did extend the deadline to give him more chance. As to Pope Francis, yesterday he visited one of Italy's largest prisons and opened so-called Holy Door to the 2025 Catholic year, Catholic Holy Year, and this is the first time for him to do that, or for somebody in his position to do so. Now, as to Guatemala, and this is our quick news, as to Guatemala, they are seeking an ability or possibility for sort of a friendly relationship with the incoming administration with Trump. And so they have declared that they're open to receive all the deportees, everybody who will be deported from United States to Guatemala. So, Guatemala may accept deportees from Central American nations to strengthen ties with incoming Trump administration. So, if somebody lived here, and there's so many articles that I read this morning in particular where people said, "Oh, I've been brought up to or brought into United States at 10 months old. I have never gotten a passport because I was illegal." Right, those dreamers, and I lived my whole life here and now married to US citizen and my kid is US citizen and I never thought to be deported. I voted for Trump. I thought he sees the good in me and I hope he sees the good in me. And I'm like, why? It's like chicken, voting for KFC. Incredible. Now, as to Israel, they have conducted strikes. They targeted Iran-aligned Houthi movement sites in Yemen, including to Sana'a International Airport. Officials, and what happened though, at that airport was the head of WHO, World Health Organization, the organization that Trump is set to leave on his first day in office. And so he was at the airport during the attack. One of the plane crew members got injured, but he thankfully did escape the attack. And certainly, WHO has called upon Israel to cease the attacks on civilians and infrastructures that are used by civilians. Now, as to Gaza, Israel has conducted another strike on Gaza and hit a vehicle with journalists and ultimately killed 5 journalists in that strike, according to local officials. Now, Hamas and Israel are still discussing their ceasefire, and at this point they're blaming each other for the lack of it. And so the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon urged Israel to withdraw from South Lebanon, citing violations of a recent ceasefire with Hezbollah. And by the way, I reported in detail on that ceasefire, right? So one thing is Gaza with Israel. Another thing with the northern border of Israel is that ceasefire deal with Lebanon that the Biden administration has managed to achieve. And, if you read if you were to read the details of that ceasefire agreement, it pretty much said that if Israel feels that there could be any action against Israel, or they think they deem it as necessary to be present, they still can be present. Now, if Lebanon were to be present or were to put their forces there, they would need to ask France and United States first before doing so. So it's sort of like a one-sided deal, which I remember the briefing with the White House where journalists were all asked, like, well, do you really see Israel leaving that line, right? The blue line, as they call it. And well, it is what it is. They're still there. Now, Lebanon-Syria relations post-Assad. Lebanon is seeking to improve those relations, and they're looking forward to better relations with Syria following the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Now, Syrian authorities launched a crackdown after the killing of 14 policemen, targeting remnants of the ousted Assad regime. So they're trying to cleanse, so to speak, their territory as at the same time, HTS, the rebel group that took over Syria and freed Syrians, they're trying to negotiate with as many as Russians, right? Because they try to sort of trade the assets. And so ultimately, here's the big question, right? Rhetorical question as to Assad regime fell, if Russia gets to keep their military base, right? Whether it's Tartus, a maritime base or Navy base, or another, which is Air Force. But what was the reason of Bashar al-Assad's regime fall, right? So Syria will become more sort of Islamic oriented, or fully will embrace this Sharia law as much as Afghanistan did. So it's very interesting in that regard. Let's check your comments real quick. Hey, Edward, good morning. Very Merry Jolly Christmas. Yes, and a Happy New Year. Almost Happy New Year. Yes, good morning. Alexander says, I've missed all the comments on Azeri plane crash. Was it really caused by Putin? Yes, yes. And please check out the recent newsletter. I put it up yesterday. It was caused by Putin. Also, they have interviewed this morning some of the survivors of the plane crash, and they said one say that they heard one bang and others are two. So they did hear explosions, and then the plane started deviating. The problem with Russian was that if plane is well functioning, right, you should put sort of allow it to land somewhere. Most likely near Grozny, right? Because they couldn't allow it to land at Grozny because it was fog or whatever they call. But ultimately, they did not allow to land it anywhere there. So they sent it over Caspian Sea, hoping it will somewhere, just perish somewhere in the sea, which did not happen. And then they crossed over and landed in Kazakhstan. But the thing, what ultimately was happening, Russia was shooting Ukrainian drones over Chechnya, and one of those, whether it was not sure what literally exploded, but something, it's ballistic, that pretty much the shrapnel hit the plane, and there are big holes on it, and the tail of the plane and the cockpit have survived, and remain intact, so to speak, and you see big holes there, and I showed the videos yesterday. So yes, they did the same thing as they did with MH17, right, very recently, or in what was it, 1983, with the North Korean plane also, so in Soviet times as well. Considered adjustment to a possible healing scenario for Russia. The Syrian example could be workable if the Russian opposition would accept the military ways down the possibility. That's the point, right, Alexander? Yeah, you're continuing the conversation we had last time. Yes, but again, there should be some resistance within Russia, I think, right? And that's the point that Biden administration has. As much as I had conversations with their representatives, and I said, look, why don't you bomb Russia? Right? Just hypothetically. And they said, well, if we help Russia to fall apart, since they have nukes, it will mean that parts of Russia will maintain nuclear capabilities, and then it will be more difficult to manage Russia that is fallen into parts than Russia with one leader, as bad as he could be. So that's their rhetoric and their idea of understanding. Um, but again, I think at least there should be resistance within Russia, whether militarily or the oligarchs or those who do control Putin money wise, have to have resistance, and then with the help from outside, that's what could happen. Same as happened with Syria, right? Because HTS, without the help of Turkish forces, would not be able to overtake Syria either, right? So, as to Russia, today Putin gave a speech, and also Lavrov yesterday gave an interview and expressed willingness to improve ties with Trump administration. But here's the drill: if U.S. makes the first move, and today they went one step further, and I have a readout on that in just a second. So, Russian missiles and drones targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure overnight amid air raid alarms. They're continuing. They did it Christmas Eve. They did it Christmas Day. They're continuing to target the infrastructure, hoping that Ukrainians will be cut off power and water, just in time for the holidays and during the holidays. Now, Russia's FSB says and alleges that they have um, sort of prohibited alleged Ukrainian plots to kill high ranking Russian officers using disguised bombs. What they are describing it as sort of like what Israel did, bombs disguised as power banks for the phones or like folders that people are bringing into offices. But again, whatever you hear from Russia, take it with a grain of salt. The Ursa Major, this is a cargo ship, Russian cargo ship, sank in Mediterranean after an engine room explosion with crew members missing. Now, today, Medvedev said that Finnish ship declined to provide necessary help, and so they declined the rescue efforts, which Finnish folks have, or administration and government have completely denied. They said, listen, we would have helped, but nobody asked us to help. And Russia really likes, when something happens with their ship or ships or any type of equipment, they rather lose their own people than save them and then let them speak about what happened. There's also a big rumor, by the way, Alexander, to the point of the plane. Since the cockpit did survive, what did happen to pilots? Because the tail survived, and hence 25 people with it, 32 people unfortunately died, and the cockpit did survive too. So what did happen to the pilot? So the rumor is that Russians FSB could have just gotten in and shot the pilot so they wouldn't be talking. Again, it's a rumor. I call it as is. If this were to be confirmed, I will state so. Where am I here? Okay. Also, Israeli forces on Friday, this just came in, raided the Kamal Adwan Hospital, one of the three medical facilities in the northern edge of Gaza Strip, torching large sections and ordering dozens of patients and hundreds of others to leave, officials said. The UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon urged Israel to withdraw. I said that already. Okay, so here we go. Yes. So Eugene Spector, right? This is a U.S. citizen who was in Russia. He has been in jail for, I think, 3.5 years, and now he's been sentenced to 15 years. Allegedly, he was a spy. So what Russians are saying is that he was convicted for espionage and was found guilty of passing biotechnology secrets to the United States, Russia's FSB security service said on Friday. Again, anything that Russia says, take it with a grain of salt. Alexander says, and now with a single power in Russia, Biden, Sullivan can handle a nuclear risk. What a joke. They didn't handle anything, right? And for this reason, I really encourage you to, it's in Russian though. I think, yeah, it was an interview. I can tag it later, about the comparison between Biden administration and Roosevelt administration, as to Roosevelt came in when World War II was already prepared, so he couldn't prohibit it, but he could maneuver. Same with Biden. And so they discussed the idea that the war happened a year in, right? When Biden was sworn in, a year and a month in, that's when the war happened, which means Russia was already preparing and dragging tanks from Siberia and whatnot. So what could he possibly done? But at this point, I do not agree the way it was handled, because it was sort of, still supporting the victim, but doing nothing to the oppressor. Honestly, sanctions, we see how they evade sanctions. We see with Chinese help and North Korean help and Iranian help. If anything, we did strengthen North Korean and Iranian capabilities, since Russia was and is trading secrets in return, right? So let's call a thing a thing. Now, Finland seized a Russian oil ship suspected of causing an undersea power cable outage and damaging internet cables. So yesterday, it came out that the Russian ship, well, first they said it's a Hong Kong ship, then it was a Russian ship that was damaging cables that connected Estonia and Sweden, then also Finland and Estonia, and ultimately Finland has seized the oil ship to investigate if this is the one that causes this outage. As to New York City, the New York State Governor Kathy Hochul yesterday signed a bill where now the New York large companies will be paying over $75 billion over 25 years for climate damages under a new law. So pretty much they will be sponsoring the efforts to sort of not combat climate change, but reverse it, or at least slow it down. Now, President Putin today blamed Ukraine for the failure to sign a new gas transit deal this year. And it's very interesting, right? It's a very hypocritical, because you start a war, right? You bomb Ukraine daily, you bomb civilians daily, you try to cut off their electric grid or any type of necessities that humans need, especially in times of winter. And meanwhile, you expect Ukraine to continue, right? Because the deal expired. And so Ukraine said, no, we're not going to transit or be your transit country for the gas to, between Russia and European Union, as much as Slovakia. That's why Fico, their leader, went to Putin to kiss the ring and ask him to negotiate and do whatnot, and Czech Republic. And so for this reason, Ukrainian said it expires. So we're going to cut off all of this bonanza, January 1st, 7 a.m. local time. Why do they expect Ukraine to facilitate Russia making money and Russian supporters who do still buy gas from Russia and do not try to go alongside with the EU notion as to being more independent gas-wise from Russia? Why do they expect Ukraine to do so? I don't know. But now they're blaming Ukraine for failing to extend the deal. Now, FDA proposed yesterday standardized asbestos testing methods for talc-containing cosmetics. Now, it's just coming in, so it's sort of in between of our international review. Is a huge deal, because ultimately it's being used in so many cosmetics, and it will be not punishing, but really slowing down the growth of many companies. This was heavily lobbied against, but FDA did decide, in favor of it. So this will be a bit of a revolution in cosmetics sector. Now, Taiwan held its first interagency military escalation exercise amid renewed threats from China. This was the first time, by the way, they held this roundtable. They pretty much sort of play pretend as, China has invaded. What are we doing now? So this was a full body karate exercise as to how we're going to respond to Chinese invasion. So it's done for the very first time. And given that Beijing started those drills, right, the biggest drills in the past 30 years, that included Navy and Air Force. And when they do this type of drills over Taiwan, they do block their internet connection. Hence, Taiwan is exploring satellites, right, and trying to have satellite connection that is reliable. And they did decline Musk's offer with Starlink, saying that we know what you think about Taiwan. We know that you're pro-China. We don't want to deal with you. We know how this works for Ukraine. So we're not going to do it. And so they have asked Bezos and Amazon satellites to provide connection. But also they block access to their ports and airports. So when the drills are going on, Taiwan is pretty much cut off from any type of business. So they are now doing the simulation as to how they would respond. Now, the South Korean legislature voted today to impeach this new acting president, barely 2 weeks after impeaching the president over a martial law bid. I know that the response is very positive. Look how wonderful the government works. But here's the question. They're right next to North Korea. And this ongoing turbulence can be used by the enemies that are literally next door. So for this reason, let's see how this plays out. But they did impeach one because he tried to remain in power by calling this martial law overnight, which was really unprovoked. Then he regretted it, certainly, but was impeached for it. Now, the new incoming president, he was sort of dragging his feet into starting an investigation into previous one. And so for that, he was impeached. Now, as to Peru, Peru declared an emergency after crude oil spill by Petroperu contaminated coastal waters. And so, again, we see it happening in the Mediterranean Sea. We see it's happening in the Baltics, in the Crimea. So it's happening everywhere. Now, they're declaring their emergency, same as Russia did yesterday, declaring emergency in Crimea since that spill of the two ships that broke apart and spilled between 4,000 to 8,000 tons of oil as well. Now, former Indian PM Manmohan Singh died yesterday. He served 2 terms as Indian Prime Minister, and he has died at 92. Now, China approved constructing the world's largest hydropower dam, affecting downstream regions in India and Bangladesh. Again, this is China trying to mix in, trying to buy themselves into power. They do this in Africa. They do this very heavily in Latin America, for which Trump's idea with Panama Canal does have a bit of a reason. No, Chinese military is not running Panama Canal or anything of that nature, or it's overcharging us with double tariffs or whatever. All of that is made up by Trump. But the idea that China tries to control, for instance, in Panama Canal, they do control clean water supply. They do control electricity supply, which certainly folks are relying on. Same as they're doing now here with Bangladesh and India, controlling the largest hydropower dam. So they're buying themselves into power, right, and reliance upon them. Now, Saudi Arabia executed 330 people this year, which was sort of a shocking statistic given that their new governmental leader, right, they spoke against death penalty, and they promised to limit it as much as possible. And at this point, they broke all the records in executing people. Now, quickly, as to President Biden, he yesterday arrived in U.S. Virgin Islands here with the First Lady. He will be staying there over the New Year's, celebrating the New Year in U.S. Virgin Islands. This is a long-time tradition for their family. We've seen President, First Lady, and their daughter Ashley arriving. Not sure who else arrived with them, but at least those 3 are reportedly there. VP Harris and Second Gentleman Emhoff were in Washington, D.C., and today they will be arriving in Los Angeles, and they will be staying in California over the New Year's as well. So Washington, D.C. is pretty much empty at this point. Now, longer readouts. Remember how Trudeau went to dinner with Trump, and after that, Trump started this whole notion that he is the 51st governor of the 51st state and all that kind of stuff. Remember Chrystia Freeland, the Minister of Ministers and the Financial Minister of Canada, resigning, who is of Ukrainian descent. She's very against Putin and Putin-like folks. and those who admire Putin. And she said, look, we need to have a stronghold with US. And so this was one of the biggest disagreements between her and Trudeau. For him, she has served over 9 years. So she did not agree with Canadian notion, with the Libertarian Party or Liberal Party, and Trudeau's idea of negotiating with Trump, right? But he's continuing this notion. To each their own. Canada's finance minister, Dominic LeBlanc, and foreign affairs minister, Melanie Joly, right? And LeBlanc has been appointed instead of Chrystia Freeland, as she resigned. They will meet today in Mar-a-Lago with aides of Trump. And the discussions will address Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods unless Canada reduces the flow of migrants and fentanyl into U.S. The Canadian ministers aim to emphasize the detrimental effects of such tariffs on both nations and highlight Canada's efforts to combat fentanyl trafficking and illegal migration. The meeting follows Trump's recent social media criticism of Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, who faces mounting political pressure and the potential early exit from office. Trudeau previously met with Trump in Florida in November to address these issues. Now, Trudeau's re-election is in October. They are facing this confidence vote that the party that was in support of Trudeau is calling upon those this confidence vote as early as January. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, negotiating with Trump. I mean, U.S. honestly relies so much on Canada. What if we or them pointed out what U.S. is getting from Canada and how much that would affect U.S. economy if Canada were to raise prices by 25%? You know, maybe that's the approach. But let's see how this plays out. Now, MAGAville yesterday, if you're not on X or you're not following this type of shit show, MAGAville turned all against the tech bros. And remember Laura Loomer that traveled with Trump on his Trump Force One and tried to portray herself as his confidant and sort of like the first lady replacement, hint, hint. For that, she was banned from the plane and off the plane, and Trump said, I don't want to see her again. But she has a big voice on X. She has posted lots of disgusting comments, wishing President Biden to rot and all that kind of stuff. So it's not somebody we will admire. But in this case, she's standing up against Musk. If you were to ask me, this is per Trump's advice because Musk is overstaying his welcome in Mar-a-Lago. Musk is also posting all type of memes, and openly. And I reported on it, right? An Independent reported on it, where he openly stated to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that he's the unofficial president and that he controls everything. So certainly Trump doesn't like it. Now, for him to come up and say something against Musk, who paid for his election, now, before he's actually in power, it's too early. Here comes Laura Loomer, and she starts tweeting. So let's go through some tweets here. She starts tweeting here. First, she says, is Dodge a way to cut spending or redirect the spending toward the pet projects of tech bro billionaires? It's looking like the later, to be honest. Hey, let's convince the pageants that we are saving them money as we enrich ourselves. Then when they find out and speak out, we will whatnot, it's hidden. Is Dodge real or is it a vanity project? Can we have the conversation without people crying? To which Elon Musk replied, Loomer is trolling for attention, ignore. Next. She's saying telling the truth isn't trolling. Read the room, Musk. You bought your way into MAGA 5 minutes ago after Trump almost had his head blown off in Butler. Remember when you voted for Biden and popped up DeSantis and you said Trump was too old? We all know you only donated your money so you could influence immigration policy and protect your buddy, Xi Jinping. Then she says, nobody can afford to live off of 70,000 a year in today's America. Stop crying about declining birth rates when you want us to live like bunch of welfare queens. Can't we have a family and keep having more kids while making 70,000 a year and also working 80 hours a week? You can make more money working 40 hours a week and overtime at McDonald's each year. And so she's referring to the payments at Tesla. And so then she posts this Tesla annual salaries, right? Mind you, all of these folks that work there, I mean, you can study any pictures, are mostly from Indian descent or any type of South Asian countries, and they're here on working visa. Now, folks on working visa cannot leave the employer, and they have to be they can only get this visa and stay here if they stick with the same employer. And as you see here, he's barely paying them over $70,000. Musk replies, your understanding of the situation is upside down and backwards. Of course, my companies and I would prefer to hire Americans, and we do, as much as easier as that is much easier than going through incredibly painful and slow work visa process. However, there is a dire shortage of extremely talented and motivated engineers in America. This is not about lending out opportunities from some magical hat. You don't get it. This is blindly obvious when looking at NBA teams, as the physical differences are so obvious to see. However, the mental differences between humans are far bigger than the physical differences. So this guy is alleging that US folks are mentally behind the immigrants. And by the way, he gets them here on the work visa. Do you think he extends the work visa or just gives them something under the table when the visa expires? I beg to differ. Then she says, the elephant in the room is that Musk, who is not MAGA and never has been, is total fucking drag on the Trump transition. He is stage 5 clinger who overstayed his welcome at Mar-a-Lago in an effort to become Trump's side piece and be the point man of all his accomplices in big tech to slither into Mar-a-Lago. I mean, just get enough popcorn or wine or whatever. So for that reason, Laura Loomer has lost her check mark and her ability to monetize her content and offer subscriptions. And folks who were subscribed to her got this message that Laura Loomer has deactivated subscriptions. At the next renewal date, your subscription will be canceled and you'll no longer will be charged the monthly fee. And so once she spoke against Musk, she lost all of her stuff. So, but it doesn't end there. For that reason, I'm saying it's not Laura Loomer coming out of blue and just like hitting Musk with a stick. It's sort of a notion, right? And I think it came up, as it always happens in Russian societies. It always comes from the top, right? There's a hint to love someone. There's a hint to hate someone. And, the sheep obeys. It continues. Here, DC Drano says, how did Dodge go from let's cut wasteful government spending to here's why we need to import more immigrants almost overnight? Did I miss something? And the cherry on top. And American workers can leave a company, imported H-1B workers can't. Tech wants indentured servants, not high-skilled workers. As a result, a significant cultural and racial divide has emerged between Indian immigrants and white Americans over H-1B visas. Now, this is happening all across this internet world. Some white Americans, particularly Trump supporters, accuse Indian workers of taking tech jobs, often using racial slurs in their criticism. In contrast, many Indians argue that American culture undervalues intellectual pursuits like coding and innovation in favor of sports, gaming, and entertainment. This conflict has created a unique divide within conservative circles, pitting tech-focused Silicon Valley MAGAs against more traditional redneck MAGAs. And that is our Friday. Now, in New York City, from New York City with love, in front of Trump International Tower, it says, Dear Panama and Greenland, apologies, he's an idiot. Signed America. And Canadians started trolling Trump's idea of uniting Canada with United States, now posting a new updated picture and said, okay, we're going to take you, Red Brother. Yeah. So let's see who's going to win if that will happen. Now, unfortunately, which happened really sort of under the covers, nobody talks about it. I mean, mainstream media doesn't talk about things that matter anyway. But Congress has defunded something very valuable at the State Department. They had a whole sort of like an office that would control disinformation, right? This is the office that came up with this report that ultimately led to the sanctions against RT Media, and that pretty much blew off the cover for those, specifically MAGA influencers that were paid by Russians. And so now it's closed, and Olga Lotman posted about it. So, Global Engagement Center has finally ceased operation on December 23rd after being completely defunded by the Congress. Now, one thing that is interesting that I found out and I wanted to show to you, Council on Foreign Relations, that I'm honored to report for, they posted women in leadership data. And here's something interesting. So 26 out of 193 countries have a female lead of female head of state or the government, right? So 26 out of 193. 15 out of 193 countries have at least 50% women in the national cabinet. For instance, Canada has literally 50-50. 6 out of 193 countries have at least 50% women in the national legislature. 6 out of 193. But see, here's the point. 26 out of 193 have female head of state. And US is still thinking, are we ready for a woman? Are we ready for... Interesting. Now, NATO announced today plans to bolster its military presence in the Baltic Sea. Finally. Remember the story with cables? So finally, they're waking up. So all of that after the sabotage of undersea power cables and internet lines this week, while Estonia launched a naval operation to protect a key electricity link. Finland seized a Russian oil-carrying ship, the Eagle Ass, as I mentioned earlier, suspecting its anchor caused damage to Estlink 2 undersea cable. The Baltic Sea region has faced increasing infrastructure disruptions since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with authorities questioning the frequency of such incidents. Finland and Estonia have called for NATO's enhanced support, while Estonia Navy patrols other critical cables. Investigations continue into the role of ships linked to Russia in recent attacks on subsea infrastructure, including telecom cables and gas pipelines. And this is a huge deal because 90% of all communication is really dependent on this underwater cables. This does include the United States as well. So don't think that this is like this Don't Look Up movie, right? If we ignore it, it doesn't exist. It does exist. And if they were to succeed in this region, they can move elsewhere. So now, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier dissolved the lower house of parliament on Friday, today, triggering snap elections on February 23rd after Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-way coalition collapsed. By the way, Scholz, in his reaction to Russia and ineffectiveness against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, led to all of this. I mean, let's call the thing. So Steinmeier emphasized the need for a stable, capable government in difficult times and called for a fair and transparent election campaign, warning against external interference, particularly on social media. Scholz, who lost a confidence vote in parliament after the departure of Finance Minister Christian Lindner's Free Democrats, will lead a caretaker government until a new one is formed. How beautiful, a caretaker government. Polls indicate a significant lead for conservative challenger Friedrich Merz, with the far-right Alternative for Germany, the AfD, gaining ground, complicating coalition-building efforts. And I mentioned it earlier, I think Monday this week, I tuned into this protest, right? Because they had this attack on civilians in Magdeburg, where the Saudi guy just drove with a car, hitting civilians. Injured, I think, over 50 people. And they had a rally in Magdeburg calling for like cleansing the nation of Muslims and Jews and all of this. And they were like doing all those gestures. And I speak German, so for me it was easy to kind of follow this. horrible. I mean, it just, all you needed is a swastika, and here we go. It was this, the rhetoric, the chanting, the support, this enthusiastic support of, yes, let's show Western Germany how we deal with this, Eastern Germany for the win, and all that type of stuff. So now, Putin today came up with this beautiful thing to degrade Trump once again. Um, Remember the story of Trump will resolve the Ukrainian issue in 24 hours. Meanwhile, he hasn't spoken with Putin. Putin says, "Oh, we will speak when I decide." So Trump doesn't call the shots, pretty much as it looks like. I wish him to do so, but it doesn't for now. Remember Fico, right? The leader of Slovakia, as I reported, went to Moscow to kiss the ring and say, okay, can we push Ukraine, right, to again extend this agreement, right? So Slovakia can keep getting gas, Russian gas, through Ukraine, to which Zelensky, he doesn't want to facilitate that any longer. So Russian President Putin expressed openness to a Slovakian proposal to host peace talks with Ukraine. Fico will now, right? Not Trump, Fico will be hosting this talks, aiming to bring the ongoing conflict to a conclusion. Following discussions with Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, an outspoken critic of EU military support for Ukraine, Putin said Slovakia's offer to serve as a neutral platform for negotiations was welcomed. Quote, "We're not opposed. If it comes to that, why not? Since Slovakia takes such a neutral position," unquote. Putin stated. Slovak Foreign Minister Juraj Blanar called Putin's remarks a positive signal and reaffirmed Slovakia's commitment to contributing to peace efforts, noting that the country had already communicated this to Ukraine. Quote, "Slovak diplomacy is prepared to actively contribute to peace process," unquote, Blanar said. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky has criticized Slovakia's recent stance under Fico, who returned to power in 2023 with a more pro-Russian tone. Despite expressing willingness for dialogue, Putin reiterated that Russia would continue to pursue its goals in Ukraine, stating, quote, "We do not exclude the possibility of using intermediate-range weapons, both today and tomorrow if necessary," unquote, referring to Russia's hypersonic missile Oreshnik, of which they had two. And then he says, "Oh, we started production." Then he says, "We're going to start production." So you had two prototypes. You shoot both of them. One hit Dnipro, another one fell somewhere in southern Ukraine in the middle of the field. So now, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov warned that Moscow is considering a range of actions, including nuclear testing, in response to what he described as the radical position on nuclear arms control held by Trump's incoming administration. Here we go. Ryabkov criticized Trump's stance on the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, highlighting the extremely hostile nature of U.S. policy towards Russia. Quote, "The international situation is extremely difficult, so the optionality of our actions in the interest of ensuring security does not contain any exceptions," unquote, Ryabkov stated. He added that Russia could reconsider its nuclear testing moratorium, especially if the U.S. resumes testing, which was briefly discussed during Trump's first term. Since the Soviet Union's last nuclear test in 1990, Russia has refrained from testing. However, Putin has indicated that Russia would follow the U.S. lead if Washington decided to conduct a nuclear test, with the U.S. last testing in 1992. Other countries, including China, France, and North Korea, have tested since then. And by the way, yesterday I watched this The Turning Point on Netflix. If you haven't watched it yet, please do. It's crucially devastating how it starts with the first episode on. It's all about the developing nuclear arms and nuclear bomb, and how U.S. Bombed Japan, and how survivors describe this attack and what they felt as little kids. It's just incredible, and what went down in Washington, and how Truman was disinformed about all of this. So if you're looking for something to watch, not an easy watch, but very interesting and informative, it's on Netflix, called The Turning Point. And Zelensky is part of it, and Stoltenberg is part of it, and it really comes down to today and how we arrived in today's world. Now, some good news. Syrian Christians attended Christmas Eve services for the first time since the overthrow of President Bashar al Assad in early December, in an early test of new Islamist rulers' pledges to protect the rights of the country's religious minorities. So on Tuesday, they gathered for Christmas Mass, and they were very happy to do so for the very first time in Syria, in the open. Now, Ukraine has sent its first batch of food aid to Syria, delivering 500 metric tons of wheat flour as part of its Grain from Ukraine initiative in collaboration with the UN World Food Program. The shipment aims to support 33,250 families, providing each with 15 kilograms of flour to feed a family of 5 for a month. This marks a shift for Ukraine, which traditionally exports grain to the Middle East, but has not previously supplied Syria, obviously, because it was under Russian control. The aid comes after Russia's suspension of wheat supplies to Syria due to uncertainties and amid Ukraine's efforts to rebuild relations with Syria post Bashar al Assad. The ongoing war has also disrupted Ukraine's grain exports, though it has managed to resume shipments through its southern part of Odessa. And now China has imposed sanctions on 7 U.S. military industrial companies and senior executives in response to recent U.S. arms assistance to Taiwan. Side note, they were under sanctions previously. This is just another hoopla. So, they're just like, we talk about it as they reacted to something. Now, U.S. sent, President Biden signed off a shipment of military aid to Taiwan recently. Now, among the companies sanctioned are Boeing, Raytheon subsidiaries in Canada and Australia, and Hudson Technologies. The sanctions freeze assets and prohibit trade or collaboration with these entities in China. The U.S. recently approved $950 million in defense support for Taiwan, which China considers its territory. Beijing condemned the U.S. actions as violations of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, urging Washington to hold arms sales to Taiwan and adhere to the One China principle. Not all. China's President Xi Jinping is set to visit Russia in 2025. According to Moscow's ambassador to Beijing, Igor Morgulov, though the Chinese Foreign Ministry has not yet confirmed the visit, the announcement comes as the two countries strengthen their ties with Russia and China opposing U.S. policies, particularly in the Asia-Pacific. Biden administration, as you know, has gathered a coalition of the countries in the Indo-Pacific to not just diplomatic coalition, but also militarily, supporting each other, exchanging arms. That's why even the smallest islands have purchased arms from U.S. and helicopters and military equipment, as they haven't done since the World War II. So Xi and Russian President Putin have previously held high-profile meetings, with Xi visiting Kremlin in 2023 after securing a third term. The visit will occur amid ongoing tensions over the war in Ukraine, with Russia and China seeking to counter Western pressure. China, alongside Brazil, has proposed a peace plan for Ukraine, which has been met with skepticism from Kiev, but supported by Moscow, of course, because it includes seizing territories and pretty much giving everything to the aggressor, which is Russia here. Now, Hong Kong passed a bill yesterday just pledging their allegiance to China with love. So Hong Kong has imposed bounties of $1 million, it's equivalent $128,728 each on 6 overseas pro-democracy activists accusing of violating national security laws, while revoking the passports of 7 others. The targeted individuals, based in countries such as UK and US, include commentator Chung Kim-hwa, former pro-independence group leader Tony Chung, and Hong Kong Democracy Council member Carmen Lau. Secretary of Security Chris Tang alleged that these activists engaged in activities threatening national security, including incitement to secession, subversion, and lobbying foreign governments to sanction Hong Kong's officials. Notices featuring the activists' photographs have been posted in public spaces, including the international airport. The measures are part of Hong Kong's ongoing crackdown on dissent under sweeping national security laws, which authorities claim have restored stability following 2019's mass pro-democracy protests Critics, however, view these actions as an escalation of transnational repression. And the US State Department has said today that Hong Kong's offered bounties for 6 more pro democracy campaigners who were deemed to have violated national security laws, and revoking of the passports of 7 more amounted for intimidation efforts. So we are condemning, once again, we are on the path of condemning everybody. Um, Good morning, Rosie Marie. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining. Well, other thing is that blurry images of 2 Chinese military aircraft featuring stealthy characteristics emerged online on Friday today, sparkling speculation among defense experts. While the designs appear advanced, experts caution that the lack of clear details prevents any definitive conclusions about their capabilities or roles. The unveiling of these images fuels ongoing interest in China's efforts to enhance its military technology. By the way, I covered their like an expo, it's military expo in China, where they pretty much dragged prototypes and they said, this is a prototype of a missile, this is a prototype of a drone, this is a prototype of something equivalent of F-35, which they managed to produce as well. But most of them are prototypes. So when they put something into air, especially allowing folks to photograph it, maybe it's a prototype or a drone and they're trying to intimidate US or adversaries. China unveiled its 6th general fighter. We all are cooked. Yes, we'll see, right? I mean, that the 6th generation fighter, that's the equivalent of F-35. I can tag a podcast in tonight's newsletter with the head of Air Force, because that's the meeting I covered, where he discusses China's capabilities and this 6th generation fighter. I'll tap it in. It's a very interesting podcast. So I'll just, it's about 45 minutes, but it's interesting to hear from professionals. So, and they evaluate these F-35 as 5th generation. Okay, so I'll tag the podcast. Let's listen to it and let's dissect. But thank you. Thank you for, yeah. Is this what you're referring to, this photograph? Let me dive into that. By the way, for next week, we're going to have an exclusive interview with somebody who's had, well, I let him introduce himself, but he's very knowledgeable when it comes to drones, U.S. military and Ukraine military. It's a U.S. person. And so I will introduce him. I will have some highlights or previews next Tuesday, and then on the 1st of January you're gonna get a full interview because we will be off in terms of news, but you'll get full interview with him where he explains the drone capabilities and everything that happens in Ukraine when it comes to war, and what is actually happening over the skies of New Jersey and New York. What is it? And he's professional in it. What policies do we need to protect ourselves, and also to study what this is and officially declare what this is. So stay tuned. January 1st, there will be more on that. Now, to finish on some happy news, Michael Jordan, right, has expanded his commitment to accessible healthcare by opening a 3rd Novant Health Michael Jordan Family Medical Clinic in Wilmington, North Carolina, funded by Jordan's $10 million donation. The clinic is dedicated to providing quality medical care to uninsured and underinsured residents. This initiative reflects Jordan's ongoing efforts to address healthcare disparities and ensure vital resources are available to underserved communities. And here's a video of the Black Jesus, as they call him.
It's good to be home, first and foremost. That's what this clinic is about. When the families are not able to support, we're there to support. If it doesn't have any money, doesn't matter. We're going to do whatever we can to support you. Because that's what happened to me. That's where I got it from. So we did it in Charlotte, and now we're going to do it here in Wilmington, which makes it even more special because this is home. This is where I came from. And no matter how you see Michael Jordan, this is where I started. This is where I'm always going to be a part of.
have to run to the NSC meeting right now that started at 10:30 and then 4 minutes at 10:25. Anyway, so I'll report on what happens in this gaggle with Kirby in our newsletter and our podcast. Good morning, Bonnie. So please stay tuned. Our newsletter moved to the website. So if you are not subscribed yet, go to honestnetwork.com. If you're subscribed, don't worry about anything. We'll do it. Honestnetwork.com. There you can subscribe for anything and everything, including newsletter and podcasts and everything. If you are a subscriber, we will be moving to the website. Don't worry about anything. If you're a paid subscriber, you will be notified to put your data once again, because we don't save anything for you aside just from your email. So you will be prompted to type in your stuff once again before expiration of whatever your subscription is. But why? Because I don't want to be on a platform. I love Substack, but since they are working together or have partnered with a company called The Free Press that is fully sponsored by Peter Thiel, don't fall for the word free press. It's was started by two New York Times journalists. I don't know them. I'm not judging anybody, but they are sponsored by Peter Thiel, and I don't want to jeopardize your data, and I don't want to lose ability to report on actual news when my stuff will start being hidden from Substack. So everything is in one spot: the podcast, the newsletter, the live streams, all on honestnetwork.com. And I'll guide you through that on Monday as well. And I put up a video guiding you through the platform. Meanwhile, the actual news podcast is available everywhere. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it, we're there. So please listen. Usually in the morning, AM Actual News, I go live for the latest. Then around 5 p.m., you'll get your newsletter and you get your podcast. So you can read and listen, or either or. All right? So that's our drill. And then in the evenings, we'll start premiering interviews. So that will start already as early as next week, and I will inform you about it. And in the morning, I'll have previews of those videos, so you can stay tuned. Okay, so you have something in the morning, afternoon, and evening. That's the plan. Free propaganda press, exactly. Yeah, Bonnie. That if you read the articles, it's like From Russia with Love. It's like RT translated. Incredible. Read over some of what they have out. Opinion, not news. Exactly, right? And it's like fully sponsored by Peter Thiel. No. Thanks, Olga. Thanks you, Rosie Marie. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. To Rosie Marie's notion, have a great day. Please have a peaceful weekend. We'll see each other on Monday morning for AM Actual News. Until then, expect your newsletter and podcast around 5 p.m. tonight, and we'll see each other on Monday next week, which will be busy for us with interviews, AM Actual News, podcasts, newsletters, and all of the above. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you for watching. Thank you, and thank you for texting me too. Alrighty, have a great day, everybody. I'm gonna be off to the gaggle, so I'll inform on that later. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.